welcome to our weekly whiskey podcast. Normally we host it in Dutch, but today we are doing it in English because I'm having a very special guest all the way from Ireland. We are going to talk about W.D. O'Connell, a whiskey merchant from Ireland. We are going to talk about Bill Phil, a bottle which is very special and I'm very excited about because this is a peated single malt Irish whiskey, something you can't see every day. So I'm very happy to share this with you. So let's dive into this beautiful O'Connell. Cheers, how are you?
Hey, how are you?
It's great to have you here. Bill Phil, I want to start immediately with it because I feel like it's a name which is very close to you personally.
Yes, Bill Phil was my great-great-grandfather, William Philip O'Connell, and he was given a nickname of Bill Phil to identify he and his descendants and his family from other O'Connells in the area back in the late 19th century, I guess the late 1800s, in a little village in West Limerick in the southwest of Ireland. So his descendants, because he had moved in from another area, so his descendants became known as the Bill Phils. So if you had your first name, so if your name was Sean, you were Sean Bill Phil, or if your name was Jack, you were Jack Bill Phil, etc. So and that carries on to today. So we're known as the Bill Phil O'Connells down there still. And Bill Phil, the original Bill Phil, was he was a merchant storekeeper. He was a blacksmith. He was a farmer. And he was very much at the epicenter of the life in that community, as were all his descendants thereafter. And he was quite famous, as was my grandfather, Jackie Bill Phil, for being very good at creating a tool for cutting turf or peat out of the ground. We use peat as a heat source. Mm-hmm. We did use peat as a heat source, and they were quite well known for creating this tool for doing that. So when I was bringing out a peated whiskey, I said, well, we might as well call it Bill Phil.
Really awesome. And so, but I hear like a lot of innovative and very charismatic people in the family, but I don't hear whiskey running through this family tree. How does whiskey start for you?
No, whiskey wasn't. They drank whiskey for sure. But whiskey, I guess whiskey was part of my life growing up in terms of that the bar scene in rural Ireland would have been very important socially for people to get together, whether it be after sporting occasions or, special occasions or funerals or whatever it is. And I would have seen, my grandfather and my granduncles and his peers and my own dad and having, a stout or a porter with a small whiskey, a Powers or a Paddy, generally one of those two. Mm-hmm. Then I got into the on-trade myself, became a publican via the hotel industry first, and got into, I suppose nowadays it's called mixology. I just call it bartending.
Okay, things change.
yeah. And then I got into restaurants, and then I, became an owner operator of bars and restaurants, and always interested in food and cooking and creating flavors. So I stayed in that industry for a long, long time. I had bars and nightclubs in Ireland up till 2009, and then I left for Australia. Did a year in Australia, just over a year, and then I ended up in Hong Kong and opened a new bar restaurant there. For a few years, and that was really when I decided that I was going to get into whiskey back then at that 2012, 2013 region.
And why was that so? What in Hong Kong triggered you to actually dive into whiskey?
Yeah, because I was super exposed to premium spirits from all over the world, and particularly Scotch. Okay. Being a proud Irishman, I was like, well, we make good whiskey in Ireland, and we used to make a lot of good whiskey, and got more into the industry to learn more about it and see what happened, the history of it. I was into history always, so it's quite an interesting story. And I felt, well, why don't more and more people in Ireland start making whiskey? And then I saw the business plan for Dingle and that arrived on my desk, and there was a small company at the time called West Cork Distillers had started. They brought out like a spirit drink called Kennedy's. And Beam Suntory then had been bought by, Cooley had purchased Beam Suntory. So I saw a lot was starting to happen. That seemed like a lot then, compared to what's happening now. It was so small, but that was the embers that started this current fire going, I guess. But it is very much the early days in the industry, and we're going to have to wait another 20 years before we see, I think, the real resurgence of Irish whiskey. But I initially looked at opening a distillery in Killarney, and I was quite a long way into that, invested into it, and spent a lot of time and money on it, and pulled out for a multitude of reasons. One big one was the fact that I didn't really have the skill set or knowledge. I realized very quickly I was going to be out of my depth with a million LPA distillery with no route to market and no knowledge of the industry. So I pulled away from that and just kept going with another business I had, and then kept an eye on the industry, and then decided, with the resurgence in new distilleries, I think it's a good time to become an independent bottler. I long admired independent bottling from Scotland. I would have been buying and drinking them for the previous 10 years, I guess. And I said, I'm going to be an independent bottler from Ireland, because nobody really was an independent bottler from Ireland 4 years ago. It's hard to believe that, but...
to believe, like, in 2012, there were only 3 distilleries, maybe 4 in Ireland.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, so like saying, like, back in 4 years ago, there was no whiskey bottler in Ireland. Yeah,
there were people with brands, but there was no one as an independent bottler. And then I became more of an independent bottler and a bonder as we got our own facilities. So I'm kind of like a traditional independent bottler, like a lot of your listeners would know from Scotland would be, or Dutch independent bottlers of Scotch whiskey would be somebody who just buys single casks and bottles them at cask strength, and that's all. That's it. And whereas we do that from time to time, but it very rarely happens. Generally, we're buying product and creating the single casks ourselves, with the exception to a handful of casks that we've done nothing with. And we're then creating batch whiskies as well. We don't always
that's something that we're going to dive in a bit.
We don't always do cask strength, even if we do a single cask as well. So I do whatever I feel is
best for the whiskey.
Optimal. Yeah. So we'd be slightly different, I guess. And then we're a bottler and bonder, I guess, in terms of that. And bonder is a tradition in Ireland that would have been a traditional bonder in Ireland would have been a publican, somebody who had a bar, hotel, and they would have been reusing their barrels basically and selling their own whiskey and spirits and wines and beers on site from those barrels, and then they were just reusing their barrels. So we're much more of a modern bonder in terms of we operate out of a 10,000 square foot warehouse, and we've got big bottling and blending facilities, and we're trying to do it at a much larger scale.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, because a lot of people know indeed the Scottish whiskey independent bottlers, where it's like, as you mentioned, just one cask and that's done. But a bonder in Ireland, is it something that you see more often now that you have been doing it for a while?
You hear the term used a lot, but the reality is there are only a handful of bonders, I guess, really. So bonder is somebody who has their own duty-free warehouse. They can mature. They have GI verification for maturing Irish whiskey. Generally, they're blending and bottling themselves as well. So you've got myself, Louise McGuan, and JJ Corrie was the first modern bonder. You've got myself, and then 2 Stacks and Morris O'Connell at Wayward Irish Whiskey, no relation. And maybe Jack Ryan, I guess, would be considered a bonder as well. And that's kind of it.
And what I also found funny is that on the bottle itself, I don't see independent bottler or Irish bonder on it. I see whiskey merchants.
Yeah.
What is that reference to?
It's just a name.
Okay.
Nothing really. What does a merchant do? A merchant goes out and acquires goods and sell, creates and sells on a product. And, we say down in the bottom of the label, I procure it. And people think procurement is just purchasing. But if you look up what the definition of procurement is, to do something with great attention and detail to it, attached to it. And that's what I do in creating the whiskies. And we don't create whiskies in large quantities, even our core products. It's very much focused on quality. Quality is paramount for us.
And can you guide me through the process? Like, okay, you say you want to produce a new whiskey or bring a new whiskey to market. Do you start with an idea and search fitting whiskies to it, or do you just see what is available in the market?
Well, we carry a lot of our own stock here, so we've a lot of barrels in our warehouse already. So we're kind of curating those casks, and we look at those casks to see where our products can lie, and if there's something that we want to do that they can't currently facilitate, then we'll go to market and see what's out there. But they would generally be for one-off stuff,
okay,
which is fine. It's great, but ultimately we need to be able to create longer lasting core products that because otherwise importers just won't be able to deal with you. They're quite happy to take single casks every now and then, but if you want to grow and get presence in the marketplace, you really do need core products on the shelf in bars as well, bars, restaurants, and retail, and that's what's required. So we're trying to do all of that. So as I said, it's very different from being your traditional independent bottler from Scotland of Scotch whiskey. So.
And you also mentioned like that you also bottle Scotch whiskey. Is that true?
Yeah, we've bottled Scotch. We own quite a bit of Scotch. We haven't gotten around to bottling more of it yet because we just bandwidth. We only have so much time to do what we're doing, and
but if
we own more Scotch, yeah, we've rum. We've acquired rum and we're bourbon, and so there's a lot of things to do. It's just having time and money to do it all as we go.
Definitely. But if it's Scotch and does it also mature in Ireland then?
No, it's left where it's purchased in Scotland. And
okay, cool.
Bottled in Scotland also.
Okay. I was just wondering because I would be very interested if there were a lot of angry Scotsmen of seeing their Scotch depart to Ireland to mature there and getting bottled there, which would be incredibly funny.
Yeah, like you can't. I could blended Scotch. I could move blended or teaspoon Scotch and bottle it here. I couldn't do single malt, but I could just move the whiskey out and call it whiskey. I wouldn't have to use the term Scotch. So there are ways around it. But if you're doing a Scotch, you probably want to lean on that that marketing power that it has. So why move it? Also, there's a cost to moving it.
Definitely. Yeah, okay, sure.
And it's a tiny part of our business. Like it's a hobby part of the business, as opposed to it's a nice to do part of the business. It's fun. Like our first ever Scotch bottling was a Lochandale by Bruichladdich.
Okay.
So a very rare and wonderful cask of whiskey, and we have some Milton Duff that'll be coming in a few years when it's 18. That's the plan, to bottle it when it's 18. Kind of have an idea on that. Some Blair Atoll, a couple of Blair Atolls, Bunnahavens, and we hope to acquire more. But like it's when we acquire that, it takes away from other cash flow that we need to do stuff that's more important to the business, really. So we kind of have to do it. If I had my way, I'd be out buying all these. Like I'd be buying a bottle of Macallan in the morning, or a bottle of 30-year-old Ardbeg or something, just for the fun. But we don't. We have to stay within the confines of reality.
All right, then let's stay within those confines. We talked about the Bill Phil, and that's the whiskey that we are going to focus on today. But you also have different, let's say, the more core range products, like small batch releases, but still like more series of whiskeys.
Yeah. We've got a 10-year-old series that we bring out. We're at batch 5 of that one now. It's a 10-year-old bourbon and rye series. It's an 10-year-old Irish whiskey. It's made of 10 and it used to be made of 10 and 12-year-old whiskey. Now it's 10 and 13-year-old whiskey that's been aged in bourbon and rye casks, American rye casks.
Okay, cool.
And we marry them together. We don't finish them in a rye cask. They're aged separately and then they're married together in a stainless, or blended, I guess. But if you use the term blended, people get confused. So in a stainless steel vatting tank. And bottle it at 48%. It's very, very nice, very easy drinking. But it's 48%, has a bit of complexity to it. It's sweet. Has a little spice on the end. It's really nice. Really, really popular in Ireland and the US.
Okay, cool.
Europe is more of a small. The older Europeans tend to be more malt snobs. But on the taste test, it definitely gets a lot of attention, and it's trying to get past that barrier, I think, with things like that. And we don't add coloring either, so the color is as you see it, and that sometimes goes against, because most whiskey drinkers, really the vast majority, don't understand that coloring gets added to whiskeys at a regular intervals and regular occurrences. So people buy with their eye essentially. So yeah, that can be another thing that goes against it. And then we have the bill fill is the peated series, peated single malt. It's heavily peated malt. Okay. Then we just brought a new series, a small batch limited edition series. It's called Small Batch. Okay. Because it actually is small batch, not like most small batches that you see. And it was, limited. This one, the first one was 1,200 or 1,300 bottles, I think. I can't remember. Of a Amontillado sherry butt finish on peated single malt. So something very different and from the usual offerings out there. It's very, very nice, and it's priced at the same price point as our other two core products. It's at 50% ABV, also available in the Netherlands.
Okay, cool.
So, and then it's a sherry series, and we're going to bring out Fino next, but not peated.
Okay, unpeated Fino.
We'll bring out Fino peated later in the year, later 2024. But we're going to do 2 unpeated now, and then we'll finish off with a peated one again. So,
what I'm very surprised about, but learning the fact that your father invented a tool for cutting peat.
No, my father wasn't that old.
Oh no, sorry, grandfather. Sorry.
My great grandfather.
Okay. And I'm just wondering, like, is this why peated whiskey is so important to you? Hearing that you also bottled a peated Bruichladdich, I can feel like it's more your preference, but
no, it's I'm not a peat head at all. Like okay. I like peat, but I like some peat.
Okay.
There's a lot of peated whiskey out there I do not like, and I think it's an integral part of the whiskey industry, and historically it's very important. But also nowadays, historically it was a byproduct of a methodology that was used to malt the barley. Nowadays, it's a flavor profile. There's a difference, and I think it's a really great flavor profile that can offer massive value to whiskey, no matter where it's from. So I don't know, is it? Maybe somewhere in the subconscious it is, but because of that. But I think it's maybe because it's such a really great flavor component that you can utilize well in blending or as just a straight peated malt. And then we get to use those casks. So like we use the peat cask then again for pot still whiskies.
Okay, so you get a single, like a pot still Irish whiskey matured on ex-peated.
Yeah, our own ex-peated cask, because you see a lot of companies use ex-Lefroy casks, for example, and offers a completely different flavor profile. And ours offers us a very unique flavor profile. So our second and third fill casks are really important to us because they're part of our story. And we were able to kind of link whiskies back to the barrels that was in them before and things like that. And for me, that's what's interesting. It might be so interesting for other people, but that's what gets me out of bed in the morning, you know?
No, but I can feel like, okay, you were talking about first fill and refill casks a lot. But if you put an interesting spirit yourself into the cask, you can say that the first time refilling it is also a first fill peated whiskey cask for that matter, right?
Well, if we had peated malt in it, say for example, and we put pot still in it, I would say it's a refill. So it's kind of, whether the distillate is different or not, I don't think really makes a difference. But it's nice. It's important for us because we're only using refills that we've already used in whiskies that we've already created. So it's the ecosystem that we need to operate in. It's obviously more cost effective as well, but it also offers us a different, more control over, we're sourcing whiskeys like a lot of companies are, but that means we're making much more unique whiskeys with that distillate than other people are making, and we're not kind of overlapping with the same products. So our whiskeys can only be, remade back here in our warehouse by us, because we're controlling the cask types, and we're not just getting generic product out of a warehouse and saying, put this in a bottle for us. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm saying, but there is a big difference in what we do versus what a brand does with kind of more homogenous whiskey, I guess, that's sourced.
And you mentioned like you create this way your own unique product, but I feel like peated Irish whiskey in itself is something which is uncommon. I don't want to say unique, but very uncommon. Do you know why that is? Why we don't see loads and loads of peated Irish whiskies?
Yeah, I guess that's changed now in the last 4 years. It's like historically what happened is peat was, as in Scotland, every whiskey here had peat in its. Like that's just how it was. But the Irish whiskey industry was a much bigger behemoth and a juggernaut than Scotch at that time. And the distilleries were very much more on an industrial basis, and they were based in port towns and cities. There wasn't really, apart from a handful of rural type locations. So when Cole first hit Dublin was the second city in the British Empire at the time, if you remember. So like it was a very important city for them. So Cole would have hit Dublin very early, and that meant Dublin whiskey got to identify itself as being very different. The clean spirit, all this kind of stuff happened. And then we built the canals. There was a huge canal system here in Ireland. And very shortly afterwards, a very big train system.
Train network, yeah.
And they were all kind of between 1830 and 1850, those two networks had kind of overlapped each other. And at that point, then coal was readily available in every town and city in Ireland, even outside the major port towns. So that was the end of peat, because the distilleries were very much operating on a large industrial scale, thinking how can they be more efficient at that time. They were ahead of their time, really. So that's kind of why peat disappeared in Ireland, essentially, apart from maybe up in Donegal. But there was peat used up in Bushmills and down in Cork, up all the way through, but much more in smaller quantities. And I guess it just faded out then, especially with the amalgamation in the early 70s, and then the formation of the new Middleton distillery with Irish Distilling Group, Irish Distillers, and they made a very big decision at that point that they were just going to focus on blended whiskies. And that's the history everyone that's living today knows about whiskey. So that's 50 years of that now. So we're trying to, which is quite a long time when you think about it. And we're all trying to burst out of that box that we were all put into by those distilling families at that point, deciding that they were just going to, make blended whiskey that was smooth and triple distilled and never smoky.
And do you feel like now, like this double distilled, peated, very common Scottish style is getting adopted by more smaller distilleries, or is it now that more the bigger distilleries are experimenting with it?
Well, I'd say like it's smaller distilleries, because like really there are a handful of very, very, very large distilleries in Ireland. The rest are kind of, you've got your kind of few million LPA distilleries, a handful of them, and then you're kind of down to 500,000 LPA and below that, and even some that are down below 250 and 200 and 100. So mostly it's smaller distilleries doing double, and peated for sure. With the exception, I guess, of West Cork and G&D, which would continue to produce all sorts, all varieties, and Cooley, I suppose, are still doing double peated. See, I wouldn't say it's a Scotch style. I would say it's a historically traditional that we would have used peat anyway. So it's not like the Scots didn't invent it.
No, okay.
I'd say we're just bringing back our, some of our more traditional methodology. And we're also doing that with pot still whiskies going back, which single pot still would have been the more widely distilled style of whiskey in Ireland, which was a mixed mash bill whiskey, not malt whiskey, malt and unmalted barley, and
other cereals. Yeah,
other cereals. But the other cereals would have been limited to rye, wheat, and oats, and because that's what we grew locally, and we would have used those in much larger volumes than are being used today by the current technical file. But there are a lot of distilleries that are operating today, and they're distilling outside of that technical file. And there is a change going to happen at some point, between the Irish Whisky Guild, which I'm a founding member of, and the Irish Whisky Association members. We're pushing to get that changed at the department level, and then to bring that to EU level, so that it's more historically accurate as well, because that's a style of whiskey that almost disappeared as well.
No, it's really cool. We pretty recently had a book recommended of single pot still Irish whiskey, which I highly recommend people at home. It's A Glass Apart. It's right here.
Oh yeah, it's an older print, by Finan, yeah. It's there's a lot of history in there, yeah, for sure.
For people, if you want to learn more about the history of the single pot still, can highly recommend that. I want to start like dissecting the bill fill I have here in front of me. Yeah. For the people at home, it's batch number 7. So we had a few before. Distilled at the Great Northern Distillery, matured exclusively in first fill ex-bourbon barrels, light smoke combined with citrus fruits and a rich biscuit malt. That's basically the short of it. But can you tell me more about it? Like, okay, this is release number 7, exclusively bourbon barrels. What has become before this?
Yeah, it's batch number 7, so it's the 7th batch of whiskey, which we started off doing our first batch in March 2020, but before that, in November 2019, we launched a single cask at 47.5% of the first triple distilled peated single malt in Ireland in over 100 years.
Wow.
And that was launched at Whisky Live in Dublin, November 2019. So just over 4 years ago now. And the first batch appeared that March 2020, just as COVID.
Yeah, perfect timing. Yeah,
everything. Yeah, and since then we're on to our 7th batch now in 4 years, and in less than 4 years, I guess, really, with the batches. And we've done a few cask strength releases. We've done, I believe, 2 500ml cask strength releases. We used to do all our cask strength stuff at 500ml when we started because we didn't have enough whiskey. And we've also done a 7-year-old peated Marsala bill fill, which was exclusive for Netherlands, Belgium, and Germany, which was also available in Netherlands. It's absolutely fantastic whiskey.
I'm afraid that it's probably all gone at this point. But
yeah, well, online is the way to go. Online, if in doubt, check out online.
Okay.
And we did a rum cask 5-year-old recently, which is available on our website exclusively. So if you want to check that out, which is absolutely fantastic. Like, we did a tasting recently where people thought it might be one of their whiskies of 2023, a 5-year-old peated malt and rum, and
really amazing.
Have we done something else? I have a feeling we've done something else that I can't remember.
And is it always from
then we did the small batches, yeah. So the small batch peated malt then as well, yeah.
All right. And is it always from the Great Northern Distillery, or is it?
It's always from the Great Northern Distillery, and all the casks for bill fill, and we use the same cask style from only one distillery in the US to keep the flavor profile, to try and keep the batches as close as possible. Creating very small batches of whiskey is very difficult. One cask can just change everything, and so I've done my best, but I would say there's a bit of variance between batch 2 and batch 7 versus 1, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's tough to do it, yeah. But that's the nature of batch whiskey, and until we can kind of scale up way beyond what we do, we'll always have that challenge, but I'm still very happy with it. It's probably a little smokier on the palate than previous ones, I think.
Yeah, you mentioned I read light smoke. So I'm very excited because you mentioned it as a heavily peated whiskey. So I'm excited. I'm gonna pour myself a glass, and I'm just asking if you can guide us through a quick nosing and tasting of the Bill Phil Batch 7.
Yeah, I'll do my best. Like I always say to everybody when I do tastings, I can't tell you what you're going to taste and smell here, because we all have different experiences and grown up eating different foods and lived in different countries, etc. So, but I'll do my best for the basics.
Okay. It is definitely a different kind of peat than what we are used to here in the Netherlands.
Absolutely, it is. Yeah,
I find that very interesting. Like when I open the bottle, I'm like, "Oh, I'm smelling a peated whiskey," but then doubt comes in where I'm like, "Is this peated whiskey?" Because it has a completely different, more natural and more earthy feel to it.
Yeah. No, that's a great observation. It's peat, but not as you know it. And it's as I said, it's heavily peated. It's 50 to 55 ppm. The batches of peated malt that we've used for this. They actually come from Montrose in Scotland. That peated malt. So it's not Irish malted barley, which is unusual in Ireland for single malt whiskey or pot still whiskey.
Okay.
But there's nobody operating in Ireland to do that kind of scale that's required by G&D to create this product, even though they don't even create that much of it. It's maybe a couple of weeks of distilling a year. At this point, when they started, it was only a couple of days. So that in itself, it'll tell you that we're not doing anything different other than it's triple distilled. Now, and not all Irish whiskey is triple distilled, as we've touched on already, but it works very, very well with heavily peated malt to triple distill it, and it gives us something absolutely very, very different. I guess if we had a double distilled 50, 55 ppm malt, it would be very similar to what you're used to. But the fact that it's triple distilled, that process is going to reduce the phenols further on the third distillation, and it's going to give us more balance across the flavor spectrum. So what it smells a bit smokier than it tastes on the palate, I guess. That's always the one kind of difference. And like you said, it does feel more earthy and natural than medicinal and industrial. But there's always there's a hint of that in there. But it's very much turned over, as opposed to what we're more used to from traditional Scottish ones that we would have all have enjoyed.
I'm just wondering. You mentioned it's Scottish barley.
Yeah.
But how about the peat itself? Like, is it Scottish peat?
The whole thing is Scottish, yeah. The whole thing is Scottish peat, Scottish barley. It's done in Montrose, big malting operation in the east coast of Scotland.
All right. Triple distilled. Can you tell me something about the age, or is it completely top secret?
No, it's a batch of 4, 5, and 6-year-old malt.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you feel like we had this discussion, like it's with someone else a long time ago, where they say, like, if you want to produce a peated whiskey, it's completely counterintuitive to mature this whiskey for a long time, because it will get less peaty over time. It still stays a peated whiskey, but it stays.
Yeah, like if there's nothing wrong with maturing peated whiskey over a long time. I just haven't been able to do it for that long yet.
Okay.
The oldest whiskey we have here is going to be 8 in June. The oldest peated malt we have is going to be 8 in June. So it's like the 25-year-old Lefroy is absolutely fantastic. It's better than 10-year-old Lefroy, I'll tell you that much. So that's
it's also way more expensive than a 10-year-old.
It is. It's just that it doesn't exist. That's the thing. It doesn't really exist because, again, peat makes up a tiny. I think people have this in every market. They think Scotch is all peated whiskey, and it's not. Like it's not, and it's I don't know. It's probably less than 8% of all Scotch single malt is peated. So I think the perceptions are definitely different than the realities across in this industry across every country you go to. So I think I would love to age some of this malt longer. I'm sure a double distilled heavily peated malt would
benefit from more age.
Would age very, very well longer term. This one, we don't know what it's going to age like, because there is nothing like it in the world to try and to test it against that I am aware of anyway.
All right. Back to the nosing and tasting. What are some, for the people who aren't trying this bill fill with us? What are some notes that you get from it?
Yeah, so it's a light gold, maybe a dark straw golden color. On the nose, you're going to get quite a burst of smokiness, earthy, smoky, phenolic notes. Not medicinal, I would say. For me, I don't get medicinal. You may find the odd person who does with this, but I would say it's less industrial, like you observed, more earthy. You definitely can get the sweetness in there of the citrus and orchard fruits that will become very prevalent on the palate. So that would be for me. It
also has something weirdly nutty, like these freshly grilled, like if you roast nuts.
Yeah, I have never picked those up, but possibly, yeah. I won't argue with you.
Oh, you're totally allowed to. Oh, no problem.
No, I wouldn't. I would never tell somebody what they can and can't smell or taste, because that's exactly what's wonderful about whiskeys and wines and, complex spirit drinks. I think that everybody is going to pick up different experiences. That's what makes it so interesting, isn't it?
That's definitely true. I'm gonna try my first sip of it, and I just want to thank you for this great chat.
Sláinte.
If you're smelling it, you're expecting way more peat smoke.
Yeah,
and it's surprisingly sweet.
Yeah, exactly. It's completely the opposite on the nose of the palate, and the nose can scare off people who are a bit afraid of peat as well.
Okay.
But I do always kind of get people at these events who say, I don't like peat, to try it, and then they go, oh, and then the nose is initially an issue for them, but then when they taste it, it can be quite different. And I would say to people, if you don't like peated whiskey and you still don't like it after having this, then you probably may never like peated whiskey. I would say
this might be a very good gateway into peated whiskey.
Yeah, now you could absolutely go. You could definitely find lighter blends out there that would have. There's some fantastic blends from Ireland that are out there, using small amounts of peated malt and very approachable for people. Very, very approachable.
All right.
If you're more into your single malt and you want to take the next step, this is probably the starting point.
It also it feels like it still lingers. Is a very viscous and very oily taste to it.
Yeah, mouthfeel is something that's hugely important for me in all my whiskies. So you generally tend to get more mouthfeel at higher ABVs. That's just a rule of thumb.
Yeah.
So you'll see generally our stuff up above the 46 mark, generally closer to 48 to 50, 54 kind of thing. And then you'll have obviously maybe cask strength stuff that up to 63% we've done. So you get the mouthfeel, like it's such a part of the whole enjoyment of whether it's a wine or a whiskey or any brown spirit, I think, for me. And I do love a nice creamy feel and a thickness or a dense liquid. And I think this ticks that box for sure. Lots of citrus fruits coming through there, bergamots, and again, the smoke is more charcoal, ashy smoke than medicinal. Again, if that makes sense to you, maybe.
Yeah, I'm always trying to figure out if it's more like sitting close to a campfire or dropping something into a campfire.
Yeah, more dropping in, I would say. But yeah, that's for me. Yeah, but some people have described it in their reviews of sitting close to a campfire too. So. It's very, very dependent, but
if we're staying within the campfire metaphor, the particular smell, if you would throw a bucket of water onto a campfire, this where it's all getting clenched immediately into this very steamy, earthy, still smoke flavor.
Yeah, that's a really good description, I think. Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there.
Just very quickly about the mouthfeel itself. Like you mentioned, it's very important to you, but how can you, as a bonder, how can you control this? Except like bottling at a more higher ABV, but if the spirit isn't thick and oily,
Well,
Yeah.
we control it by buying spirit that we only want to produce whiskey from. So like we don't. There are lots of distilleries there. We don't buy off everybody for multiple. Some we have never even approached. We just wouldn't be able to get whiskey off them. And others I would just look at maybe what they have and go, nothing really interesting for me there. And then others, they just wouldn't have the distillate available to sell us, and some we have never even been able to try. So we'll just have to kind of take our time. We have, distillate from multiple distilleries at this point, so we just have to wait to see. But generally, I'm looking for, like, this is the triple distilled malt, but most of our single malts outside of this are double distilled.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and using a double distilled malt, you always get this more heavy flavors with it.
Yeah, like a triple distilled malt, or that's not peated, is really great product. Like it's so easy drinking, so approachable, so great for blending. I'm trying to create more challenging, complex whiskies. And again, every whiskey I create it's literally a very selfish journey, because I'm just creating whiskey I want to drink, and then hopefully other people like to drink it, because we don't create whiskey just to tick a box in a marketplace. Okay. That's not what we do. Yeah.
I find that that's the best way to produce whiskey. If we're talking about like RRP of the bill fill, what is it roughly?
I believe, don't hold me to this one, but I believe so. The previous batches would have been, in the last, say, 12 to 15 months, would have been around €70 a bottle. Okay. But I think we're down now to €60 a bottle on the new batches. We got rid of tubes. We reduced our costs a bit, and we were able to patent, rather than keep the price, like, we don't want to keep the price point high for people. We were trying to get it where it makes sense for everybody. So I think we should be down. That new one that's not in a tube, the new stock price that hit the market should be about €60, I believe. Yeah.
Really cool. I feel like that's a very reasonable price for something that is so unique and not very common in the market.
Yeah, it's good quality. Everything we do, like everything on there, is high quality. It's a very high quality bottle, corks, labels. Definitely. We put a lot of attention into them, and the whiskey is very high quality. And again, it's 47.5%, and a lot of effort goes into it to making it.
No, so definitely.
We're certainly not getting rich on it, that's for sure.
I'm just wondering if people want to follow your story along and want to keep in touch with you, how can they best do it?
Yeah, we'd love people to get in touch with us. They can get us on all the social channels at O'Connell Whisky. That's Whisky EY, as opposed to the Scottish spelling. And the website is wdoconnell.com, and O'Connell is 2 N's and 2 L's as well. That's another one to watch for. But you'll find us if you just put O'Connell Whisky, and I pop up pretty quick on Google. We're very interactive. If anyone wants to see what we get up to in our warehouse, and then we do a lot of videos on Instagram. The last 12 months, we've started it.
Yeah, I was planning on shouting it out, because it's a very funny series where it's all different topics and a lot of it. Yeah, it feels like Irish whiskey myth busting. If I'm allowed to say it like that.
Yeah, an element of myth busting, and then there's like just talking about processes, what we're doing, and the day, what we do here operationally, and show people emptying casks, filling casks, and bottling, or talking about whiskeys we're about to bring out, maybe describing what was it like the Amontillado, describing what Amontillado is to people, because 99% of whiskey drinkers that I've met don't know what Amontillado is. So
yeah. It's to be honest, there's a lot of things to learn about whiskey in general. And I feel like following you guys on social is especially a very good way to follow out or find out more information about whiskey that you guys are putting out in a very fun and interactive way.
Yeah, and I tried to keep it, probably to my own detriment, I tried to keep it like fact-based. I'm not into kind of like the wizardry and mythology of whiskey. I like to keep things fact-based and cut the bullshit, I guess. And I think that's the way we want people to be more educated about, especially the modern, newer whiskey drinkers that are coming up. They're probably a bit younger than me, unfortunately, but like yourself. But yeah, that's kind of that we want to educate them and kind of take away some of the jargon that's out there that maybe puts people off maybe entering the whiskey drinking scene, because it can be a bit of a, I look at me, I know so much about whiskey, and it's kind of, I'm in the business. I've been drinking whiskey for a long time, and I'm in the business. You know, morning, noon, and night. You know, eating and sleeping it, and I still don't know everything about the business, and I would never claim to. And there's every country has different rules around whiskey. We have to remember whiskey is not Scotch or Irish, or it's whiskey. And it's made in many, many countries by many different people of many different backgrounds using many different varied systems. So we share a lot of similar traits, but yeah, it's so different. And that's what's fantastic about it. So it's a really exciting hobby as much as being an expensive one, but also a very enjoyable one.
Yeah, no, and I can imagine you doing your part to put out Irish whiskey on the market. I feel like that's a very great way to share this very important part of history. Thank you so much for your time. I want to recommend everyone to follow you on socials. O'Connell's Whiskey with EY. Remember that, and if people want to send you a message, can they also DM you guys?
Yeah, you can DM us. It's at O'Connell Whiskey, no S. O'Connell Whiskey.
Yeah,
and I am at Whiskey Merchant, so you can follow me as well if you like. It's generally very boring. My own
mostly trade shows, or I'm
mainly just reposting my own stuff or giving out about something to do with the government at some point. But
as you should probably, yeah.
But no more than anybody else on X these days. But it's just a bit like we do have a lot of fun competitions. If you get to our website, there's a single cask exclusive there that you can't buy anywhere else. Really? It's the 5-year-old Bill Phil in rum, which is really, it's 59%. It's super, so good, and it's €90 for a bottle. And we also have a cask share program, which allows you to buy one share in a cask. And that one share gives you one 500ml bottle of cask strength whiskey, limited to 150 shares per cask. Generally, we sell about 120 of them up front, and we keep back 30 for when we open our own shop here on site at some point in the future.
Oh, cool.
And they're bottled annually on a fixed date and time, and you pay for the excise duty and the shipping then and at the bottling time. And we kind of tend to put more unique whiskies in there. So we've got a few pot stills, and we've got the Milton Duff Scotch and PX is in there, which is super single malt. We've got like a 15-year-old grain coming out there. We've got a 7-year-old malt, some vintage mash bills from Bowan. Yeah, some great stuff in there. We've done 2 so far, and the third one will be bottled in March. So they're the kind of things you can check us out for. And we do hope to have a visitor centre here, which is going to be more, again, about me pontificating about agnostic history of whiskey around the world, actually, and not just in Ireland. So we'll try and take people on a different journey as well, but that's probably another 18 months away. But we have the space here on our site, and if anyone is ever in Ireland, you're free to DM us, and if we're around, we'll show you around our facility.
I really love it that you guys are so inviting. That's so amazing. Cheers. Thank you so much, people at home. If you like this episode, please follow us. Also, we are on Instagram at Elements of Whiskey. We don't post about politics that often, but we do post about whiskey quite often. So that's at least one plus. If you want to follow us on Instagram, it's at Elements of Whiskey. We're back next week with a regular Dutch episode again. So I'm looking forward to see you guys all there. Cheers.
Dank u wel.